So, if you know me at all, you know that I sort of force you to be friends with me. And Jenny was definitely one of those victims. I met you, Jenny, quite a few years ago now, which is crazy. I had a friend of mine introduce me to Advisor, which
Yep.
is where you currently are. And I have been fortunate enough to get to do life with you over these last few years. And whether you like it or not, you've sort of been put on my board of advisors, so to speak. And so I am blessed to call you when I have questions about business and life. Yes, I get
Yeah.
to do life with you. And unlike the other women on my board of directors, we are in a very similar season of life when it comes to where the ages of our kids, they're all boys and all that kind of stuff. So it's been really fun to get to do that part of life with you. Jenny Mitchell from Advisor, would you like to kick us off and tell us about your current role and a brief summary of your career?
Absolutely. So I have, gosh, at this point, I guess almost 20 years of experience in working in the ad tech space. And I'll kind of cover my background to date and then touch on what I'm doing now for Advisor. But effectively, I started out with an ad server right out of college and started in a role where we were building publisher relationships and I was doing things that were a little bit more technical in
Mhm.
certification. So effectively making sure that rich media ads, which is somewhat still around today, but that the ads that we were serving would function within these publisher pages. So at that point in time, one of our biggest publisher partners was AOL, and we were working to get, if anyone remembers, this will date me if I haven't already, the AOL Instant Messenger
Oh,
application.
girl, many a night did I spend on
Yeah. Yeah,
Instant
on
Messenger.
AIM.
Hmm.
So we were working to make sure that ad content would function properly within AOL Instant Messenger. And we were one of the first sort of companies and first partners that AOL had to make those ads function. And so from there, we built out a business with a number of publishers, thousands of publishers, where effectively we were making sure that the ad would show up properly. If it was an expandable ad, because that would expand properly, that it would click through properly, that the video elements of the ad would play. So very heavy, honestly, like quality assurance, getting into data alignment, making sure that impressions and clicks and all the data lined up. So that's where I started. Walking into that, certainly did not have any educational background in ad tech. I had an advertising degree and an art history degree, which has really served me well in life. Um, but just they were probably like a late stage startup when I started
Yeah.
there. And that was what would eventually become Seismic. When I first started, it was called I Wonder. But I ended up being there for 12, almost 13 years, all the way through when the company was acquired by Amazon. And at that point in time, even before that acquisition, and I guess while I was there, I get ahead of myself. I went from that department to eventually running all post sales operations. So when I
Hmm.
left Seismic, I was running a team of 200 to 300 people around the world. And I was running all of our post sales teams. So that meant everything from implementation and onboarding, customer success, support, professional services, custom development for certain larger advertiser direct customers. I worked a lot with global brands and sort of built
Hmm.
this global accounts team. It was a team of account managers who would service brands at the brand level
Hmm.
and not at the agency level. So again, all post sales operations were underneath my purview. Um, at that point, I had decided it was time for me to move on and do something a little bit different. Once you're with an organization for that long, you just start to think about maybe I want to diversify my experience. Uh,
Absolutely.
and it just so worked out because I'm based in Atlanta that one of my connections knew someone who was starting an ad tech startup. And they were basing all of their operations in Atlanta and they needed someone to come in and run customer success. And so then I pivoted to the startup space. That was about 6, 7, maybe now 7 years ago. Um, And yeah, started to run customer success for them. From there, sort of pivoted more into a role of program management.
Mhm.
We, as a business, had pivoted away from just supporting local broadcast advertisers to really wanting to support cross media type media plans for agencies and large global holding companies. And so my role became more focused around how we could gather their requirements, build a platform to suit what they needed, and then run them through a UAT process and program, ensure that we had higher pass rates, and then eventually migrate their teams over to that software that would allow them to book, bill, and pay. That was my time at Hudson MX. And then from there, just decided again, it was time for me to kind of diversify that experience. Again, had started to have conversations with some of my colleagues, and someone said, I know this guy who's has this startup that's somewhat late stage, or sort of like mid stage, I would guess, or I would say, and he needed someone to come in and run their post sales operations. And so that's where I am today. So started with advisor and again, kind of came in just to run customer success. And then in my 3+ years at advisor, now have moved over into more of a post sales operations role, which is really what I enjoy. I really enjoy generally just solving problems for
Mhm.
organizations from a post sales perspective, but also have had the experience to get really involved with the leadership team, implementing various operating systems and programs for our organization to make sure we're operating in the right way. We implemented a program called EOS, which is an entrepreneurial operating system. And it's really just an approach to make sure you have both short and long-term goals established. What are the things that are top priority and what are we doing to get there? There are a number of other things that go into that program, but really at a top line level, that's the main focus of EOS. It's able to be part of launching that for Advisor, which really just helped us to get way more organized, better at our internal communication, better at running cross-functional programs within the organization. So yeah, I have really enjoyed being able to kind of branch out and do all of those things. So that's where I am today.
What an incredible career you have had.
Yeah.
Um, so I have so many questions, but let's start with um, maybe focusing just a tad bit on um, like some of like you're leading through organizational change. Bear with me
Mhm.
1 second.
Good.
So, in your career journey, you have held various leadership positions. What would you say some of your key learnings or pivotal moments that have shaped your leadership approach have been?
Yeah, great question. For me, because I have been through very rapid growth, and on the
Mm-hmm.
other side of that, very rapid scaling things back, right? When you get to a point,
Mm-hmm.
as an organization, you need to pivot, right? And sometimes that means making really hard decisions. And I think as a
Absolutely.
leader in an
Mm-hmm.
organization, you're always going to be faced with having to make really hard decisions. And
Mm-hmm.
very early on, having gone through, because even with Seismic, we were acquired, merged probably 3 or 4 times in the time that I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And every time that happens, one, there's always a lot of nervousness. Even if nothing negative comes of that change, change is hard, right?
For
I
sure.
always talk about, and this, I go off on tangents. So apologies that I just branch off. I always think about when I first graduated from college, they gave me a BlackBerry. And that
Mm-hmm.
BlackBerry was like they literally called it a hockey puck.
I remember.
My other phone was a tiny little flip phone. Think about moving from my flip phone to that BlackBerry, and at first, how it was so annoying having to use a full keyboard, having to carry around this giant thing. But then you adapt to that and realize if I want to type a text or an email, I can type it so much faster because I'm not having to hit 5 for K. So you adapt to that. And then to move from a BlackBerry to an iPhone, again, It's very frustrating. And at first, it's change, it's hard. But then you learn how to use an iPhone and you think, how did I ever live without an iPhone? And how did I ever live
Right.
without a BlackBerry, right? It's a hard period of time, but you get through it. And so I think I kind of approach any kind of change in that way as a leader now. One, I think it's so incredibly important to always think about how anyone is going to be impacted by that change. And it could be a change as small as, oh, we're changing CRMs, or it could be, we are going to have to reorg this entire company.
Yes.
And that is going to mean a reduction in force in some areas. And that's going to mean growth in other areas. And how do we deliver that message to everyone who's involved, people who are impacted, people who are not impacted? And I think I've been lucky enough to go through that so many times that you really start to see what works well and what doesn't, and how organizations sometimes don't get it right. And so then you improve and you make it better the next time around. So I think that has really molded like who I am as a leader, to think no matter what the change is, like at the end of the day, people matter. People, it doesn't matter if you're having to, deliver a really hard message. You've got to think about one, how that's going to be received. Two, what can you do to soften that a little bit? But yeah, at the end of the day, like you've really got to think holistically about what the impact is going to be of those changes, positive or negative, and just really come at it with a comprehensive approach. And I think, being a great leader means you put your people first. And so that's something that, after going through that a few times, you start to realize like it just makes you feel better that even when you're having to deliver really hard news, you can do that in a way that is, people first minded at any point in time. But yeah, there are times where you just have to also focus on, this is a business decision. This is not personal. Over time, you start to learn why that matters and why that's helpful as well.
During your time at Hudson, you played a crucial role in implementing the media buying platform. What were some of those challenges that you encountered, and maybe what were some of the things that you did to overcome them?
Yeah. Oh man, I'm probably going to be somewhat repetitive, but it really is the same theme.
I kind of figured it
Yeah.
might be, but there's probably some other stuff to pull
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
there.
Change is hard. I will tell you, making a change for a finance team anywhere, not just at an agency, is hard because you are dealing with a group of people who live in a black and white world, right?
Mhm.
And that is their job and that is their strength. And those are the benefits that they bring to any organization, right? They are a critical part of a functioning business, the finance team. When you are trying to make a software change for any finance team, that comes with a number of challenges where people are very set in their ways because, again, they are worried about things like compliance and
Absolutely.
auditing and things
Mhm.
like, if anything gets messed up with that, it can have absolutely terrible consequences for that business.
Thinking about it from that group of people's point of view, like kind of going and realizing that that team, those are the things that they're worried about. Yeah.
Yeah, can you think of, you think about the weight of that, right? You're running a
Hmm.
billion-dollar global holding companies, finance information, or even a multi-million dollar, agency. That's really important. And so you have to think about when those people come to you and you show them a system, you train them on the system, they immediately point out why that new system doesn't have every single bell and whistle that your system has, right? Everything that they did before. I did process XYZ with 1, 2, 3. Your system does process Y and Z, but we have to have the X. Okay, tell me why you have to have the X, right? Like ask questions, like instead
Oh
of
my goodness. I was
immediately,
just fixing to say, like, let's sit there for a second because
yeah,
trying to understand the why, I think, is so crucial because no, you might not have whatever it is, but you may be able to help them solve for that why behind they need, for
exactly.
that they
And
need it
and
with
is it
something
truly
else.
needed, right? Like
Mm.
There are two ways you can approach that. You can go to them and say, you don't need X. I'm telling you, you don't need X. There's that phrase, you win more, you can catch more flies with honey. It's 100% true. If someone comes to me and says, you don't need to do that thing that has been so important in your job and in your role for years, then I'm going to immediately start to question one, your credibility, because I'm going to say like, well, how do you know? Like, you don't work in finance, you work in software. But if I instead approach that by saying, tell me about your process, tell me about what you're doing today. And then I can piece together, okay, what if, and pose it as a question, always phrase it as a question. What if X was actually handled in between Y and Z automatically, so you didn't have to worry about it? And of course they're going to come back with, well, do it. Can we trust it? Is it going to work? Well, let's test it. Give me 10 scenarios where X has to be done, and let me show you in the system how that can function and what the outcome is. And then you tell me if that works for you or if it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then let's have a conversation about that. And then that's when you obviously get leadership teams involved and you say, listen, we can build the system to account for X. We don't think it's necessary because we think it automatically happens between Y and Z. But if you guys agree that you have to have X, great. We're happy to do it. Here's the timeline. Here's the cost. And then you have a conversation to make a decision. Those were some of the hardest conversations to have because you also, and I think this is especially prevalent as women in the tech space, I tend to approach everything saying like I'm the dumbest one in the room. I never care to be the dumbest one in the room. I don't know anything about financial process and how things, how invoices I do know now, but at that point in time, I might not know a lot about how invoices are reconciled and what's important about that. I'm just kind of winging it because I'm just trying to get them to implement this software. And so
Mhm.
I think a lot of times, that's really nerve-wracking. And sometimes you got to fake it till you make it a little bit, and really just break it down to what is it? What is the need? What is the true problem we're trying to solve? How are we going to solve that problem? What are the options? What are the outcomes? Um,
Yeah.
I think if you break anything down, but it's intimidating when you're on the phone with these teams that are demanding that you do something some way and you don't speak their language enough to be able to explain to them why they don't need that. That can be really tough and really intimidating.
I imagine.
Yeah.
Um, so now let's talk just a little bit about seismic. So you, as I understand it, managed a variety of operational teams and oversaw those client relationships. How did you navigate the complexities of managing a global team, but
Yeah.
ensuring that consistent service and, delivery?
Yeah, great question. One, I came into that role very slowly. So like I said, I started there in 2007 and then just sort of grew into a management position of two individuals. Everything was US based at that point in time. And then through mergers and acquisitions, every time we would merge with a company or acquire a company or be sold to a company, my remit would grow and grow and grow. And eventually that meant merging with a team where most of the team was based in Israel, in
Hmm.
Herzliya, which is like a beach town. I shouldn't say beach town, but there's a beach there. And it's right outside of Tel Aviv. And so that was my first experience directly managing teams that were not American. And so, one, you have to immediately adapt to cultural differences. And those can be as small as the way you communicate, or as large as in Israel, they work Sunday to Thursday. Saturday is their holy day for the Jewish tradition, and in the Jewish culture, Saturday is their holy day. So they worked Sunday to Thursday. So that meant sometimes on Sunday I was working, and responding to things. But then on Friday, they were not available, right? So as a leader and as a manager, I try to always say my door is open at any point in time. And I think as you start to manage those teams, I was actually making a joke the other day with an old coworker. I remember I still have several apps on my phone where I would have to align time zones because if I needed to be on a call with someone in Herzliya someone in London, someone in the Philippines, someone in Tokyo, like aligning all of those time zones was tough. Um, and so it also meant for me sometimes taking calls at 5 o'clock in the morning and sometimes taking calls at 10 o'clock at night. Because if I'm talking to my CSM or CS manager or implementation manager that's in Sydney, Australia, they're not going to start their day until about 6 p.m. my time. And so sometimes, yeah, that meant being on calls later in the day, later at night. Same thing in Tokyo, same thing in Beijing and all around the world. So I think it's one, never feel, and I think one of the mistakes that I made early on too was, okay, great, we have this process. Let's just roll that out globally. Well, that doesn't work. Every culture is different. Again, there are big changes, there are big differences, there are small differences. You have to really focus on, again, what problem are you solving? Because if I said to my team in Germany, okay, we have a new system that we're going to use for centralizing all of our communication with our customers.
Mhm.
Well, they might tell me, well, we don't communicate with our customers through email. We have phone calls or we go meet them in person because we're, as a small country and as being in the city center of that, it would be like someone in New York here where all the agencies were based in New York. We can just book a meeting with them. We don't send emails. Whereas in the US, everyone's kind of everywhere. And so email is our main tool of communication. So if I just said that to them and tried to roll that out globally, that would be met with some.
Resistance.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you have to understand that not one process is not going to work for everyone. But again, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Is it that you want to make sure that the customer communication is consistent? You can do that in a number of different ways. And of course, technology is so advanced now, we have all these things like Gong is a great example. They can record all of your customer interactions. So, that helps with that. Back then we were doing that very manually. But I think, again, figuring out culturally what are those differences and what are they doing that's working? Great. If you feel your customer support is going really well, tell me about your churn rates. Are we churning customers? Are we retaining customers? Tell me about your retention rates. Because if there's not a problem there, let's not try to fix something that's not broken. Again, there's so many
Mhm.
phases. Let's not fix something that's not broken. What's the problem we need to solve? Is the problem that we need to be more efficient as an organization because we feel we have some organizational bloat in resources? But let's talk about that in a different way. Let's figure out what's the root of that problem. Why do we think that? What's our true operational cost to supporting every client? Doing that analysis. So, yeah, figure out the problems you need to solve, and know that not one size is going to fit all, especially with a global team. You have to be pretty flexible in the way that you talk to people, the way you support people. And I managed a number of people that I never met in person. That got me very used to Zoom meetings. Obviously, this was way pre-COVID. And so I was very used to that from the very beginning because over half the people that I managed, I never met in person. So at least having them on video, you get a little bit more personality. So that helped as well.
That was so insightful. I think there are a ton of things to take away from what you just shared. And, especially what is the problem that we're trying to solve and understanding, the cultures and like meeting people where they are.
Yeah,
Um,
always.
but now, as we wrap up, I would love to kind of talk a little bit about mentorship and professional development. I would love to hear, um, because they are such crucial aspects of leadership. Have you had a ton of mentors and role models who have influenced your career, and how do you pay it forward by mentoring others?
Yeah.
Just like your thoughts on mentorship and how it's impacted you as a whole.
Yeah. When you ask that, so one, I feel like I have had so many amazing leaders, managers, colleagues in my life. Just, having been through so many times of like change as an organization and having to really work, it's funny, we all joke like, oh, you feel like you've been to war with these people, right? Like you have
It
that
creates a bond.
such a bond.
Yes.
And it's funny when Seismic, well, I Wonder at that point in time was first acquired, and I started working with that Israeli team. I This is another life lesson that I'll never forget. Um, the director of that department had come to Atlanta to meet with our teams and to understand like what we do, what's our process. And after he went back to Israel, he called me one day and he said, "Listen, I've made the decision that I'm going to have this woman who's part of my team now lead all of certification." So she was effectively taking my job. I think that you are going to, really grow under her. Like she's very tenured. Um, and I think she's a really great resource. Well, that was my first sort of I don't know, just like I was disappointed, right? I was disappointed to hear that someone else was going to be now making decisions for my team. And so I sent him an email. I just like we talked about it and I said, okay, like let me just, kind of process this. If I have
Take
any
it
questions,
in.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I sent him an email saying, I was um, just, I forget the words that I used, but, and I didn't all out say like, this is ridiculous or anything like that. I was very diplomatic and basically saying like, I have some concerns
Hmm.
with this and this, the way that we do things, the way that our businesses are a little bit different. And I'm just like a little bit disappointed that, you didn't see whatever it was. But mainly I was like, here are my concerns for why I think this is a bad decision. Like, again, in the most diplomatic way possible. What did he do with that email?
Send it to her.
Sent it to her with me in copy. I could have died when that happened, but it taught me. So then I meet with her for the first time, and Israelis are they'll hit you right between the eyes.
Direct.
They're very direct. I have so many wonderful, wonderful like friends and colleagues now that we've worked together for years off and on. But our first phone call was her having read that email. So, life lesson, never put anything like that in
In
an
writing
you don't want
ever.
it allowed me to just lay it all out there, right? So in a way, I was so after the fact, I was so glad. And then I met her, and he was exactly right. She is one of the best mentors to date that I have ever had. She and I chat back and forth in a number of ways. Um, she became eventually a consultant for customer experience groups and has gone on to do a number of things. But she just was such a great mentor to me to show me how to bring organizations together, how to really get to the bottom. She was the one that taught me, like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Let's not build a process for a problem we don't have. Let's get to the root of it. What are we trying to solve here? I just have the most respect for her. I had a COO at Seismic that I reported into who was probably the hardest manager I've ever had, but she taught me more than I've ever learned probably about just how to work with different people. And again, figure out what is motivating people. When people say things or when they make a decision, they didn't make that decision just to make you mad. They didn't make that decision just to like, put you into a bad headspace. Like there was motivation behind it. And there are always things that you may not know. And she just taught me so much in regards to that. She was a tough cookie. But she gave me more opportunity than probably any other manager I've ever had, which is wonderful and amazing. So still talk to her to this day.
Sounds like you have been very fortunate. And I don't know if you watching will pick up on this, but Jenny, you literally like can't stop smiling talking about them and your whole face lit up.
They're so great.
I won't get emotional, but may we all strive to leave the type of impact that you have had left on you by these
Yeah,
women.
yeah, 1,000%. Like and you talk about mentoring other people. I have like one of the greatest compliments I ever got actually was I managed this woman named Jen, and she told me once that like my open door policy was the best thing that ever happened to her because anytime she had an idea or something she just wanted to, bounce something off of me, like my proverbial door was always open. That's the best compliment I could ever get because yeah,
Mhm.
what a blessing to be able to pay that forward, to have people say those things about you, that you helped them. Like I just was talking to someone this morning and she said, when you first started at XYZ company, she said, you said one thing to me that has stuck with me. And this was probably 8 years ago, that all of that started. So yeah, things like that, just like, I don't know, you never know when you're going to say something to someone that's really going to stick with them and like shape their career and shape like
Absolutely.
how they go forward as a person. What a great compliment. Like there's nothing.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
I think that that's a wonderful place for us to end this conversation. I certainly can't thank you enough for the impact that you have made in my life. You are truly one of my most favorite humans, and the world is such a better place for having you in it.
Uh,
And I
Likewise.
truly appreciate you taking a few minutes to let me share a piece of you with other people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Listen, likewise, everything, I'm rubber, you're glue. Is that what you say? Whatever you say bounced off me, it sticks on you.
Well,
uh, you have pushed me in ways at times that, for me, like a lot of times, one, public speaking in general, even like just one on one, is so nerve-wracking for me. And I think like being a part of panels and things like that and just any kind of public speaking has been like, oh,
but you're so good at it.
I could throw up and die. I get so nervous. And just talking in general, because part of it is you never want to say the wrong thing, right? Like as much as I'm kind of like, I don't really care if I say the wrong thing because I tend to be not super PC. But at the same
You're
time, that
yourself, and
you
I
get
love it.
nervous, you know. So you have like pushed me to do that in so many ways and so many times. So I cannot thank you enough for that.
Well, it is my pleasure. I will hopefully be able to share this with everyone soon.
Yeah, I love it. Love it.
Well,
Awesome. Let me know if I can help you with
I
anything.
sure will.
AM,
Um,
whatever it is.
all right. Well, have a wonderful weekend.